Okay, I think the recording has begun. All right, guys. So, what I would like to ask you guys today is what do you guys understand by periodization? Now, when I ask this, you are more than welcome to raise your hand, or you can type in the chat box, or talk, or unmute yourself. And as I always say, guys, this is a real opportunity for you guys to break down those barriers of talking to other people. And what I mean by that is in this industry, whether you're a beginner or novice or professional, you have to be able to talk to people. So you can use this as an opportunity. If you are someone who is a little bit more timid, you're more than welcome to talk. You do not have to, but you are more than welcome to. And I encourage you to put yourself out of your comfort zone because you guys are doing this more from a remote point of view. And I do completely understand because a lot of you guys do work and you do have other commitments. But try to, when you do have a chance, to be able to um, break through those limitations maybe that we put on ourselves. And I understand it's a little bit intimidating. I do understand, and I respect that it's not for everyone. But if you really want to be able to transcend the industry and be able to get messages across to your clients, you have to be able to talk. So, anyone? Do you guys remember the question? What is periodization to you? Okay, guys, this is going to be a long Saturday if we're not going to be interacting with each other.
Hi, Cameron.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks, Charlize. Is that correct, Charlize? Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
100%.
yes. Okay.
So I haven't actually done this module yet, but I think periodization
Mm,
is basically the stages where the body goes through from when you are starting to work out until where you basically where your goal is set. I think it's the
mm.
period, the time from the beginning till where you want to be.
Okay. I mean, that's not out of the realm of where we are, but very close. A very good punt. Thank you, Charlize. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you see, a large portion of the time, right? When it comes to looking at these stuff, right? You more often than not actually have what you need in principle. So don't be shy to give forth your opinion, right? There's no wrong answers here. I'm not trying to make you look silly or anything like that. I just want you to be able to see if you know. So thank you, Charlize, for doing that. Now, guys, when you look at that, right, she is not completely wrong. It is about the journey from A to B. Now, if we look at, for example, Astrid's answer, Astrid has said it is a cycle plan from training program to competing in sports training. Now, this is the interesting part. A lot of the time, periodization is associated with training. However, in saying that, would you say, when I mean training, I mean like sports training and that. Now, would you guys say that how we approach a high performance athlete and how we approach a general population athlete are different or the same?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
So, Landon, I'm asking, would you guys say that if what Charlize and Astrid have put together is the structure, if you will, of periodization, would you say that our approach to a general population client and a high performance athlete or individual, be it a rugby player, whatever the case may be, athlete, are the same or different?
I think it definitely might be a lot different.
So Charlize says different, Astrid says different, Emmanuel, you say different,
That's
Precious says it's the same. Astrid says very much different. High performance is the type of training program general population is looking for a fitter and healthier lifestyle training program. It's the same. Okay, just let's pause there. Precious, if you feel like unmuting yourself or maybe in the chat box, you could expand as to why you say it is the same.
Hi, I'll say it's the same because, I mean, periodization is the different phases. Well, I think it's the different phases of training, but the program could be different. I mean, according
Okay.
to the type of athletes that they are.
Okay. Now, when you say it's the same, what aspects are you saying are parallel to one another, if you want to call it that, or the same, for lack of a better explanation?
Well, in terms of them starting their program,
Okay.
yeah, I think, well, with starting their program, it would be the same, and then it will obviously go as they go up on their program, then the specifics and the intensity and the frequency will differ.
Okay. Now, if we use most athletes, to use your train of thought, most athletes have a set destination, right? Set seasons, if you want to call it that. If you look at professional athletes, they'll go through the set seasons throughout the year, off season, pre-season, in season, post-season, off season, etc.
Yeah.
Within that, they'll then also have, when they're in season, they'll have match days or match weeks rather. So they're continuously having something that they need to peak for. Now, if you're looking at someone who is not a professional athlete, how would you approach that part? I'm just curious. I'm not there's no wrong answer. I'm just asking.
Well, I mean, when you're speaking in terms of it's being off season, on season, the training program, well, depends. Maybe they could be doing strength. I'm just assuming they could be doing strength, they could be doing rehab, they could be doing plyometrics. I don't know. I'm just thinking. But with someone who's a general athlete, it will depend on what they're training for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, that is a very, very insightful approach. Now, why I say this, right, is, so just for a moment, is it right to say a high-performance athlete, such as a sprinter, is looking metrics and speed training program and a general population plan is to be functional in the day? You guys are not wrong. You both are right. Both can be correct in the same conversation. Precious is incredibly insightful to the exponential approach to it and the more exterior and extrinsic association with training. Where Astrid, you're very correct in terms of the intrinsic or more from the internal side, like the actual day-to-day nuts and bolts of what that individual will be doing. But in principle, both are correct. And why I want you guys to approach this is let's look at this slide. Can everyone see this slide? Right? Now, if you look at this from a periodization point of view, you can see we have the preparation phase. If we're looking along the x-axis, we have the first transition, we have the competition phase, and we have the second transition. Now you can see, as we go through this, technique, intensity, or the quality of the training, and then the volume will change. So maybe as we preparing, we start with more high volume, moderate intensity, and we're not too fussed about technique. We just want to get the body moving. But as we move through the timeline, all of a sudden, maybe the volume comes down. We then meet the volume with intensity and technique. And all of a sudden, as we get into the competition phase, the most important time, to start clocking in, now all of a sudden, things are starting to balance. Does that make sense? Whereas if we look at right here, peaking at the most important time, right there, we can see that technique is of the utmost importance, intensity is of the utmost importance, but volume not so much. Why? Because we've conditioned ourselves throughout that specified time period to ensure that we are just getting the most activation for as little expenditure as possible, which is why it is so important that our technique and our intensity are on point to ensure carryover to the decreased volume. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions? Any disagreements? You guys are more than welcome to disagree. We can have a fun debate. Right. Now, to use Astrid and Precious, if you are an athlete, like you said, a sprinter, Astrid, are you a sprinter? You seem very interested in sprinting. High school, yes. Okay, cool. So is I. So now, if you are a sprinter, when we look at this, if you think of training for whatever event, nationals, districts, whatever, provincials, when you get to the race week of, now if we think of Bolt and if we think of all of them, even if have you guys been watching the athletics recently? I mean, my word. What's that young gentleman's name? Civil. He absolutely ran circles around Noah Lyles. If you guys are interested, you guys must go watch. They sprinted in the rain. Horrible conditions, but what a race. Now, if you look at that, if we take Mr. Usain, do you think the week of the Olympics, do you think he is more towards here? Is he doing more high volume, moderate intensity, very mediocre technique? Or do you think he's more down here where he has less volume, but he's more focused on technique and intensity? Which would you say? Now, I know you guys are probably thinking, why am I spending so much time on a stupid graph? Because if we understand this graph, guys, you can apply it to everything. But if you do not understand this graph, we are in problem. Or we have a problem. So Emmanuel says less volume and more technique. Astrid says more technique and intensity. That is what I would do. Okay. Melo, good morning. As I was saying to Emmanuel earlier, I'll get you guys your link. We've just had a problem with the recording software. I will get that to you. What I'm asking Melo is where on the graph, more to the left or more to the right? So further along the x-axis or near the beginning of the x-axis, would Usain Bolt be in the week of sprinting in the 100-meter final? Would it be more around here where you have a higher intensity and technique and a lower volume, or towards the beginning where there's more volume, moderate intensity, and very low technique? Volume, more technique, says Precious. Okay. Guys, you're all correct. Now, why? Because when we go through this, when Bolt gets to his final week or week of competition, etc., we don't want to be putting unnecessary stress on the body from a volume point of view. We want him to be able to get the biggest bang for his buck. In this case, we want the intensity to be high, the technique to be on point, and the volume can thus be very low. If we keep the intensity high, and if we keep the volume high as well, with high technique as well, it's going to take him longer to recover. Correct. Reason for a low volume needs a recovery period. Correct. Now, you think of athletes and whatnot, you also need to remember there's various metabolites, there's various musculoskeletal recovery, etc., etc. ATP, phosphocreatine systems, replenishment, etc., etc., etc. Right now, that's of course where diet and supplementation and all of those good things come into play. However, in saying that, we need to make sure that the body is primed to recover while making sure that it is neurologically and physiologically primed for what we want it to do. So that's why we are zoning in on the nitty-gritty. If we think of Formula One drivers before a race, do you think before a race they all of a sudden starting to run 10 kilometers so that they feel fit and healthy for the race, and they're also spending 2-3 hours, behind the simulator, etc.? No. They have primed themselves so that all their energy, both neurologically and physiologically, can be applied to that one moment. You don't want to leave any space or any gaps open for energy expenditure that you do not need. Right? Which is why we lower the volume. But you can only have low volume if your intensity and your technique is high. Because the technique optimizes the performance, the intensity adds an element of structure to it, and then the volume therefore tapers down to a more moderate to low to account for the increase in intensity and technique. Does that make sense? And even training your body to get used to that. I mean, if you think about life, right? Let's think that this at the beginning is when you first started to learn how to drive a car, right? When you first learned to drive a car, you used to do it much more. You used to practice maybe every day or once a week, right? But you would be doing more practice, for example, let that be the volume. Then you would the intensity, so that would be speed. And then technique would be actual driving technique. At the beginning, you were more focused on just driving, were you not? Yes, you may have driven at moderate speeds, maybe some high, some low, just to get used to it. But at the end of the day, the technique wasn't really the most important thing that you were focused on. You're just focused on getting behind the wheel and getting confident with being in a car with other cars around you on a road where you have a robot, where you have etc., etc. Would we all agree? Do you guys think I'm being mad? Okay. Now, as we then move on in life, as you slowly get better, you no longer have to spend as much time behind the wheel. Why? Because as you've already, how do I say, what's the right word? Adjusted to your environment, right? And by adjusting to your environment and acclimatized, you're slowly now getting used to being on the road. So now we can start to bring up the intensity and the technique starts to come to the front. So here now all of a sudden you're focusing on checking your blind spots. You're focusing on clutch control. You're focusing on all of those various wonderful things. And all of a sudden, when you get to the time when you go for your driver's test over here, the competition phase, you're no longer focused on just driving on the road. You're more focused on, do you know what to do and how to do it with the technique and to do it efficiently and effectively? You have the elements of intensity, so you're able to fluctuate between, speeding, decreasing speed, stopping at a robot, being able to go around a circle, join a highway, emergency stop, you name it. But the volume, you don't need to spend as long doing all of that because you're mastering the technique. You've done with the exposure, you've conditioned yourself to be able to be behind the wheel, but now you're just focused on making sure that you get that done. Makes sense to everyone. Cool. Beans. All right. Now, let's move on. So, of the methods of periodization, there's 4 various periods. You have your preparatory period, your first transition period, your competitive period, and your second transition. Now, what we need to understand with these various periods is that everyone goes through these periods, right? They are stereotypically more catered for athletes who require structured programming and planning, but effectively everyone goes through it. And why do I say that? Is if you are at varsity or if you are a young individual and you have tests and all of that, your competition period would be when you write the test. Now, what I mean by that is when you go through day to day and you go through the various different phases of life, would you not agree that whether it is a test or whether it is a race day or match day, that effectively, not necessarily wholeheartedly from a physiological point of view, but from a neurological perspective, that we can somewhat have very similar approaches to both events? Would you guys agree or disagree? Agree. Charlize would agree. Okay. Well, effectively, guys, they are the same. And now what I want you to think about is because you still have to consider the neurological axis that the brain goes through. Stress, etc., performance, etc. So don't be too quick to think that this is only for athletes, but rather think of it as, right, everyone, we can divide it up into periods. If you're a CEO and you have a big financial year end or your month to month reports, etc., you can build that in. That can be your competitive period. That is when, you need to be at work or you need to be working on your craft for a hell of a lot more time than what you are able to be spending elsewhere. Now, when you think of that, we can start to prime it. How many people, when they get busy, or if you have test week, or if you have financial year end, or if you have a really busy time. How many people have that, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, I don't have time to train this week. I don't have the energy to train this week. And then what happens? We don't have the energy to train. We don't have the energy to buy in. Now, bear in mind, this is individual specific. We're not blanketing everything. This is just individual specific, right? But in this case, with those individuals who then prioritize their work, would we not agree that we could use the same principles of periodization, for example, here, for them? That during those weeks when you need to really optimize your time, you only have half an hour, 45 minutes that you can afford in the gym. You don't have your normal hour and a half. And surely we could use this approach of more intensity, more technique, and less volume. We can change that in their plan. We can cater for that. We can cater for a 3 workday week or workout week rather than a 5. But we cannot do that if we haven't primed the body throughout the programming to get there. Because if we haven't, and we just go from here to here, is there going to be as efficient of a carryover? Now, look, I know that we are looking at the very small and finer details of it, but why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Because it's quite fascinating. Because do we or do we not want to pursue high performance? Or are we just shooting in the dark? Do we just want to use it as a cool tagline that we can put on our Instagram, or we can put on our TikTok, or you can put on Facebook and tell everyone that you are a high performance coach? Or are we going to actually set up our clients to be able to function in a high performance space? That is the question, right? We need to be able to see that is how we approach things, right? Now, again, if you are someone who is pursuing bodybuilding, or if you have a general population client and they more of your run-of-the-mill client, they just want to come to the gym, they want their push-pull legs or upper lower or bro splits or whatever the case may be, then that's fine. That's hunky-dory. You get a lot of people whereby gym and their training is seen more as a mental space where they can train and they can just be fit and healthy, and they buy into a program that they enjoy. They enjoy training chest on a Monday, universal chest day, legs on a Tuesday, back on a Wednesday, shoulders on a Thursday, and arms on a Friday. That's fine. But we can still approach it. We can still approach our planning and training structure to cater for various levels of performance. Would we agree? Because if we don't, right, if we don't know what the end goal is, if we don't know why we are doing what we are doing, how on earth are we able to have an accurate form of check-in, an accurate form of quantification, if we don't know whether we are Arthur or Martha? We don't know whether we're coming or going. We just created a plan and we hope that the plan works because our clients said that they want to grow their glutes. So, we've given them hip thrusts and donkey kicks and squats and lunges. But how are you going to quantify that? What exactly are you using as your method of determining progression? Are you an artist? Are you going to draw them one week and then draw them the next week and see, okay, cool, well, we have an element of glute growth? Now, I know I'm going overly into this, but I want you guys to think, like, how are we then able to gauge whether we are progressing, apart from mentally? Any suggestions? And what I want you guys to think of when I'm asking you these questions is genuinely, what do you think? There's no wrong answer. You can say, I actually wouldn't do anything, Cameron, because I would go based on what the client would say and feel. Then if that's how you would approach it, then that's fine. You're not wrong. But what I want you guys to be able to see is that you have so much more to offer than just the nuts and bolts of making a training program. There you go. Pay me my money and cheerio. You have so much more to offer. There's such as glute growth rather than do low sets and reps heavier and focus on slow reps with proper technique. Yeah, that's more than nuts and bolts of it, actually. I mean, you're not wrong at all there. I mean, there you would need to look at on pure glute function and growth. Do they feel that they have that mind muscle connection? You know, is there the desired growth? If they are currently on a cut, for argument's sake, and you're lowering their calories and in a calorie deficit, you know, is there that carry over to an element of glute growth? Maybe not. Maybe you need to change up their programming like you have done here to be able for them to see, okay, cool, maybe they have slightly better connection now, whatever the case may be. But what I'm saying is that how would you guys gauge progression? That is, it's just an open-ended question. How are you gauging progression? Are you doing it visually? Are you doing it through conversation? Like what measures are you using to dictate whether your client, has sustainable growth or not? Or is moving along the plan that you set out for them? You guys have gone quiet.
I think basically if you measure the client, then you can see through measurement if the client is gaining glutes and the growth that they want. And I think following that, well, it depends on, do they want to cut or whatever? Do they want the muscles to actually show, or do they just want glute growth, to the glutes bigger? I will see what they actually want, the client wants, and then from there you just need to think on a way you are going to see it better. So if they want the muscles to actually cut, to visually compare the starting point and maybe like take weekly photos so that you can visually see it, or even like just the measurement of the glutes, I think will also show you the glute growth.
Okay. That's a very logical and valid approach. What I would just say to you guys is there is no correct way. Why do I say that? Right? Because each client is going to be individual. You yourself have to be able to hang your hat on whatever method of quantification that you put down. If you go more off of look rather than weight, for argument's sake, then hang your hats on that. But you have to be able to apply that across the board, right? And that's for your clients across the board, right? And not everyone is able to do that, and it does take time. So that's why it's always good to put things in. Okay, cool. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? Right? Now that's when you set fundamentals in from these different phases, whereby you look at it more from a holistic point of view where you're looking at, okay, right, this is our strength phase. This here, we just want, for example, in this case, we just want them to get stronger. We just want you to get stronger. Here we're just pushing weight. We're not so focused on chiseling down, etc. Here we just want to be weight centric, weight focused, and we will fuel you accordingly to make sure that you are able to elicit the training response that we are looking at having. Now, you then can move through the different phases while using that as your center point of quantification, right? So it's always just something you can return to. Astrid here has said the client's goals they have set for themselves into the program, making sure that there's change in program as it is still periodization. Well, there we go. You're not wrong. It's just all about how can you ensure that the carryover is substantial. Right. Now let's get into some of the definitions, and then we can have more of a conversation once we get through some of the slides. Okay. Now, as I'm going through, if you do have a question and you want to raise your hand or whatever the case may be, just raise your hand, ask a question, and we can go through it. Cool. Now, the preparatory period. So this is the general preparatory phase, typically occurs during the early part of the period and often targets the development of a general physical base. This early part of the preparatory period includes high training volumes, low training intensities, and a larger variety of training means that are structured to develop general motor abilities and skills. Now, that would be quite self-explanatory. The more you do it, the more you are training that neurological response, the more that you're showing your body, right, this is what I want, this is how I want to execute it again and again and again and again. When I do this, this is the muscle group that I want targeted. Now, the first transition period. This is the link between the preparatory and competitive periods. The resistance training in this period focuses on the development of strength and power. The central aim of this period is to shift focus towards the elevation of strength and its translation into power development. You see, now what we've done is now that we've primed the body, we're now starting to get a little bit more resistance training. We're now focusing more on the strength and power, etc. And like they said, the central aim of this period is to focus towards the elevation of strength and its translation into power development. So you're almost slowly optimizing the body's physical capabilities, right? Now, the competitive period. The central training target during the competitive period is preparing the athlete for competition by further increasing strength and power via additional increases in the training intensity while decreasing volume. The competitive period includes peaking and maintenance. For peaking, athletes use very high to low intensities. Here we are looking at 50% to 93% of the 1 rep max, if you had to quantify it, and very low volume 1 to 3 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions for 1 to 2 weeks. For maintenance, athletes modulate training between moderate and high intensities, looking at 85 to 93% of the 1 rep max, with moderate volumes, about 2 to 5 sets of 3 to 6 repetitions. So you see how we are now starting to, as we get more towards the competitive period, and when we're in the competitive period, we are very much calculated, right? We are very much like, okay, cool, we're here, right? We just want to be focusing on this percentage of your 1 rep max, and all we want is what we call almost like our activation sets. We just want a quick fire response. We want to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. We want to make sure that when we load the body, we're loading it with sufficient weight to ensure that the intensity is there, as well as the technique. All right, with the biggest carryover from a musculoskeletal point of view. Now, what about the second transition period, also known as active rest? Well, between the competitive season and the next annual training plan, or the preparatory period of a macro cycle, we'll get into what those are now, sometimes referred to as an active rest or restoration period, and generally lasts for 1 to 4 weeks. Note that if active rest is extended for a prolonged duration, athletes will require a much longer preparatory period in order to regain their performance capabilities. And the second transition with active rest provides a period of time in which athletes can rehabilitate injuries and refresh both physically and mentally before beginning a new annual training plan or macro cycle. This period should not last longer than 4 weeks because long periods with reduced training will require the athlete to engage in a longer preparatory period in order to regain sporting form. Right. So now when we look at that, that is effectively quite self-explanatory. Why? Well, if you think about it, if any of you guys run, right, or do some form of cardiovascular training, have you ever, for example, maybe it's Christmas time and you getting up to Christmas because everyone wants to look good for summer, etc., and you stop doing cardio, Christmas comes, New Year comes, and all of a sudden it's the second week of January and you decide to reacquaint yourself with the treadmill or with the exercise bike or just running on the road or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden what used to effectively be a breeze now feels quite difficult. And that's because you've shown your body a new baseline. You've shown that it doesn't have to be conditioned to run 5 kilometers or whatnot. And now it just needs to be conditioned just walking around or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, your brain has set a new baseline. So now we need to retrain our body and get it up to speed with where we want it back again. Now, that doesn't mean that you've lost all your potential to get there or whatnot. It's just that your body's just, acclimatized to its new environment. So like with anything, if we want to try and keep the performance there, we understand that there's a period of recovery that the body needs to go through, both neurologically and physiologically. So both for mental performance and physical performance. However, in saying that, too much of a good thing can also become a bad thing. And in this case, that is rest. If we go through too much rest, if we take too much time off, we are actually going to have to work harder for longer because we have just set ourselves even further back. And we're going to have to try and bridge that gap, but we can't rush it because of various injury exposure, etc. So we're going to have to spend longer in that preparatory period to ensure that we are conditioned enough to start that preparatory period to go into that first transition into the competition phase. Do you guys see what I'm saying here? Thumbs up. Anyone else? You guys all good? Okay, cool. Now, there are some words in here that we need to look at. That's the different cycles. Now, you have your periods, and now we're going to be looking at cycles, right? Now, here, if we look at the annual training cycle, right? If we look at that, right? Now, what we want to see here is if we start in that off season, we're going to have our base, then we build, then we're going to taper into our event. We're going to have our event, then we need to recover, and then we maintain. And then you rest, then you build your base, then you build, you taper, you perform, you recover, you maintain. Take a break, base, build, and again, 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 and again. You guys understand? So do you see how now we can start to see where each section is going to go? And believe you me, I know that it seems like, okay, cool, Cameron, now we were discussing periods, now we're discussing phases and seasons. How does this all tie in? I'm coming with the receipts. Fear not. Fear not. Fear not, ladies and gentlemen, for all shall be revealed. Now, if we look at phases and seasons, this I've put in. You will not find this in said textbook. This is just my approach from a neurological point of view, which you need to understand. Cool. So consider this bonus content. Hidden Easter eggs in movies and all of that nonsense, right? This is looking at your stimulus fatigue recovery adaptation theory, also known as your GAS system. Okay? We have the alarm phase, the resistance phase, the supercompensation phase, and then the overtraining phase. What we need to look at is when you have your alarm phase, that's like the body going off, like, holy smokes, I don't know what on earth is going on. I really don't know. Right? Because you put your body in a new environment, a new training program, a new format, a new platform, whatever. Right? Your body's going to be like, holy smokes, this is new, a little bit concerning. Not sure if I'm able to do this. You then build into the resistance phase. You build in resistance against this new exposure. You're slowly coming to terms with what your body needs to be able to do, the environment that it's in, etc. How many of you guys have trained legs before and you started at the beginning of a plan, and after the first leg day you think I am going to die? I genuinely think I'm going to die. And all of a sudden you start to think when you finish the workout, how on earth are you going to get to your mode of transport, vehicle, bus stop, whatever the case may be? How on earth are you going to get there from the gym? And you start contemplating about, is there a wall that I can lean against to get there? If I were to collapse and die, what are the first things that the paramedics going to think? You know? So you build resistance, and all of a sudden next week you train legs. And yes, you still feel the same. You still are probably like, I am seeing Casper the Friendly Ghost. I do not know where I am. But hey, I feel like I can get to the car. So we're slowly building resistance. We are slowly being able to take that and generate that resistance response. We then have your super compensation phase. So now the body needs to compensate for that. Right? So what ends up happening is that we start to become optimized within the space because your body starts to compensate for that. All of a sudden, it knows now, right, I need to use the carbs that I'm being given before the workout to push me through the workout. I need to do this, or I need to do that, or whatever the case may be. But then what happens is that if we do not make sure that we are keeping an eye on that and how we feel and whatnot, we can very quickly start to overtrain. Why? We start to overtrain because all of a sudden we've generated a new baseline and we think we need to do more rather than keeping going through and go through the natural training cycle. We then start to do more. All of a sudden, the 4 sets of squats that used to make us pretty much be on the brink of passing out is no longer enough. Now we're doing 6 sets, 7 sets. So now what we've done is we've completely knocked our body out of whack, because how are we going to be able to ensure that there's enough recovery stimulus when we've changed one of those modes of periodization, in this case, volume? So we're still trying to stick at the same intensity and the same technique, but we've increased the volume now. So you're going to put yourself in a state of overtraining, because now all of a sudden, you're going to be at a loss from an energy expenditure point of view. Do you guys see what I'm saying there? So that is when we look at the stimulus fatigue recovery adaptation theory. This is what we are looking at. Because you have the stimulus, you fatigue, you ensure that you recover, and you adapt. But if you don't, you will go into the overtraining side of things. Everyone on the same page? Cool. Now, we have the various different seasons. Now, we have our off. Precious, you have a question? Yes.
No, I don't actually. Sorry, that was a mistake. I just wanted to give you a thumbs up. saying that
Okay,
we're on
no
the same
worries.
page. Yeah,
No worries.
thanks.
So here we now have our different seasons. So we have the off season, we have the pre-season, the in-season, the post-season, right? Now, if anyone watched the Springboks last weekend, we were none of these. We were none of these. We were just absent without leave. We were there for the first 18 minutes, and then we were just absent without leave. However, stereotypically speaking, most athletes, most training individuals will go through various things. If you're a bodybuilder, you have an off season, then you work into the season, then you compete, then you have a post season, and then you're off, and then etc. etc. You have a small little rebound, or you slowly bridge your food back up slowly, slowly. Then you have an off season. You don't go straight into eating junk food. Why? Because you want to slowly replenish your glycogen stores, slowly increase your food before you start slamming and banging McDonald's, KFC, Steers, you name it. Right? You want to slowly bridge that. Okay. Now, what about that? So when we start to look at this, the phases and the seasons, we're starting to look at your hypertrophy, your strength endurance, your basic strength, your strength and power, your active rest, your peaking or maintenance, and then, like I said, your active rest. So these are the things that we are going to be looking at with regards to putting them into that element of periodization. So now we're starting to build, right? We understand the theory. Now we're starting to apply it from a practical point of view. So if we look at hypertrophy, strength, or the endurance phase, right? Remember here we have the seasons. Now we have the phases. The seasons, the phases. These phases are going to form the seasons. Make sense? Now, if we look at the hypertrophy or strength or endurance phase, the hypertrophy or strength endurance phase involves low to moderate intensity. So here we're looking at 50 to 75% of the 1 rep max and high volumes, right? So intensity is moderate, volume is high, okay? Looking at 3 to 6 sets of 8 to 20 repetitions. If we move on to the basic strength phase, remember here, this was the hypertrophy or strength endurance phase, right? But basic strength phase involves higher intensity and moderate to high volumes, right? Of 2 to 6 sets of 2 to 6 repetitions. So you can see now that from a basic strength, we just want to ensure that intensity is there, but so there's volume. So we're trying to get that baseline strength going. Now, if we're looking at more of a strength or power phase, right? The strength or power phase involves low to very high loads of 30 to 95% of your 1 rep max, depending on the exercise, and low volumes of 2 to 5 sets with 2 to 5 repetitions. Why do we want that? Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to slowly start to generate this graphical exponential translation. What I mean by that is you're going to start from low to high. You want to start to generate that power. You want to start, for example, doing a box squat. Then all of a sudden you're going to do a box squat with holding 2 kilograms. Then you're going to do a box squat with a weighted vest. Then you're going to do a box squat or whatever, or an explosive jump, or just a squat with 1 plate, then 2 plates, then 3 plates. And slowly over that, we're going to try and generate more power as the load increases. Does that make sense? So you're training the muscle under load, but not periodizing, but you're slowly increasing that load over time. So when it comes to executing, and if you look at athletes, for example, all of a sudden they've primed their muscles to lift 95% of their 1 rep max, but when they're going to sprint, all they need to do is generate all that force into their muscles to drive them to sprint. Because they've conditioned their bodies to be able to do that power underneath 95% load. So it's almost like if you're thinking of a car with a trailer, right? And you have a heavy trailer or a tractor, and you load it, and slowly you're driving at 10 k's, 20 k's, 30 k's. All of a sudden you're traveling at 140 k's an hour, right? You know, how much power are you required? How much fuel are you using to generate that? Probably quite a bit, right? Now all of a sudden you stop, you unload the trailer. Now, how long is it going to take you to get from 0 to 140? In no time. It's going to take you substantially less time because you're not going to have that element of extra load. But you need to condition yourself to be able to do that over a period of time. Does that make sense? Which is why it is very important when you look at sprinting training and you look at all of that, why it is so important that athletes do train with heavy weights of a moderate efficiency, because it's not always about, right, just being lean and mean. You need muscle to generate that force, to generate that drive, be that in all aspects, right? If you look at people who are wanting to get stronger, wanting to get fitter, people who want to do high rocks, etc., you have to have an element of power. You have to have an element of endurance. You have to have an element of strength. You have to have an element of muscular development. If you do not have an element of muscular development, how are you going to be able to generate the force that is required to stimulate the response that you so desire? Right? We need to be able to understand that we need to bridge the gap for our body from what we expect it to do and how we train to get there, right? If you have never trained to sprint, don't be running like a long distance runner or a cross country runner, or whatever the case may be, and then you rock up to the track and you're wanting to beat Usain Bolt. You haven't conditioned the body to that. You've conditioned your red and white muscle fibers, your A and B muscle fibers in a completely different way. Completely different. You've been so focused on endurance that you forgot about force and power development. And this is where injuries occur, because now all of a sudden you're taking the body from a state of endurance and now you're telling them, no, come puppy. Today we're sprinting. Now all of a sudden your hamstrings, your muscles are so used to getting into the movement. They're used to a different phase of breathing. They're used to a different energy requirement system. All of a sudden, where you've relied on more maybe on fatty acid supply or carbohydrate supply or sugar, now all of a sudden you need phosphocreatine and ATP supply. Now, it's not to say that you're not going to have that juice, but does your body know how to effectively use it? Maybe in a once-off situation, granted. But if you want to reach that true peak performance, you're not going to be able to do that if you haven't conditioned the body to be able to function in a desired way. Adaptation also takes time. Adaptation creates neurological significance in the sense that it generates that response again and again and again. And you build into that. You build that response. You build that approach again and again and again. But you're not going to be able to do that if you do not adapt and if you do not know what we're trying to do. So it's so important to understand the season, but also the phase. To understand what phases are you going to put together during that season, so that when you get to that in-season or that competition phase, you've gone through the various phases that are going to result in that optimized performance when you really need it. Do you see how it's more of like a mathematical equation? It's more about structuring and building rather than actually just putting a program together and off you go. And this is where I say to people, if you read, this is why I get so frustrated with when people undermine trainers, when they undermine strength and conditioning coaches. Because if you are at the top of your game, it is no different, right, to, for example, an accountant preparing their financial statements for a company. Or a client. is no different to a lawyer building a case for their client. It is no different to an engineer designing a building, etc. Granted, those all have various different elements of difficulty, various elements of programming, various elements of planning, measuring, and follow through. Granted. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that prepping for court is harder or easier than creating a training program for a client. I'm not going to say that. The same way, I'm not going to tell an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, or an engineer that periodizing a program for an athlete or a team or an individual is harder than what they do. But I'm saying the principle of setup is very similar. The principle of structure, the principle of understanding the structure in which you need to build for optimized functioning is inherently the same. If you do not, there's that saying, failure to prepare is preparing to fail, right? So we have to ensure that we know what we are preparing for to ensure that we have that carryover. Okay. Now, when we then move on to the peaking or maintenance phase, for peaking athletes, we use very high to low intensities, looking at 50 to 93% of the 1 rep max, and very low volume, 1 to 3 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions for 1 to 2 weeks. For maintenance athletes, modulate training between moderate and high intensities of 85 to 93% of the 1 rep max, with moderate volumes of about 2 to 5 sets of 3 to 6 repetitions. So you can see peaking and maintenance very similar, but very different. When you're peaking, you're willing to lose a little to gain a little, just in terms of a recovery. You're not so focused on the intensity because you can fluctuate between 50 and 93. But when we are maintaining, we want to keep it between that 85 and 93. We're not flatlining at 93. We're not saying that every set, every rep needs to be 93, but we're allowing an element of leeway of roughly 8% of your 1 rep max. So we're giving you, or giving the client rather, an element in which their bodies can still be progressing, but we're not flatlining it to the point where they are unable to maintain. Whereas from a peaking point of view, we solely want to go through that so we can prime the body, and then we also have 1 or 2 reps where we bang in front, in the face, and making sure that the body is giving its all. Everyone on board? No questions? Right. Now we are going to start to combine it all together. The seasons, the phases, the periods. Now, before we crack on to this, where we can see we have all of that together, here we have the periods, then we have the seasons, then we have the phases, and how intensity and volume will be thus affected. So, would you guys like to go and get something to drink, go to the bathroom or whatnot, and then we crack on with this? Or do you guys want to smash it out? I don't mind if you guys would. Yeah?
I think from
Sorry.
my end, we can drive on. I think we can drive on. I think.
Okay, Precious has just asked to go to the toilet. Ashley just wants to fill up her water. Okay, let's just give it 5 to 10 minutes, guys. It's 11. Let's quickly, if you guys want to just, I'll leave this here. You guys can read it. But if you guys want to quickly go and just grab something to drink, go to the bathroom or whatever, you can. Melo, you have a question?
Oh yes. Sorry, Cameron. I just wanted to ask,
Yeah.
will you be able to make this recording session available?
I am going to do my best to Melo. Sorry, we've been having issues with that software, but I think I've figured it out. The reason with the software, it's recorded, but I wasn't able to share it with you guys. So I was only able to share it with like administrative individuals. So I've needed to ask someone higher up if they can remove that barrier so then I can share it with you guys.
Okay.
Also, I'm going to have to share it to you guys, and then I'm not sure if it will let you guys have access because you guys are not part of the quote unquote company, if that makes sense. But maybe what I'll do, I'll ask if I can. But with one of the videos, I posted it on YouTube, and then you guys can just watch it on YouTube.
Which one are you referring to last week? The nutrition class.
No, not the nutrition class, the one before that, the assessment and programming, blood pressure, etc., etc. I've posted that one on YouTube.
Okay, what about the one from nutrition?
I haven't posted it yet. I've been waiting approval to post that.
Okay.
Okay.
Because like I actually sent an email, but
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen it yet, but
I did mention to Manuel also earlier. I did receive your emails. I've been unable to organize that because unfortunately it's out of my jurisdiction. But I am actively working with them on trying to get it sorted. I do apologize. I do apologize to you for that. But as soon as I have it rectified, then I'll be able to assist you. Okay.
okay.
I
That
do
goes for the
apologize.
same. Okay. That goes the same for today's lesson as well.
Yeah, no worries. No worries at all. No worries. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Okay. Okay, guys, let's give people 5 to 10 minutes. And then we'll be back. Okay. So quickly go do what you need to do, and then we'll crunch out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Cameron?
6. Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask, why is the basis of, in terms of intensity, why is it measured with your 1 rep max?
Why is it measured with the 1 rep max? Because that is a default base.
Okay.
Because if during that period, if let's say we do testing at the beginning, I can't remember if you're in the lecture of the testing when we do the
Oh,
assessment and programming. But
no.
if you look at that, we need to make sure that we have that baseline to ensure that we can apply that across the board. Because if not, how are we going to, for example, how are we going to gauge what our clients are meant to do? Now, granted, if you're working with maybe Gen Pop clients and you're just programming for them, granted, cool. You know, if they feel like they can lift 35 kilo dumbbells when they do bench press, then that's fine. You do what you feel you can do. But if we really want to zone into progression and periodization and we almost want to quantify it. Now, granted, we're looking at a very different approach to what has become the norm within the industry, right? Now, when we're looking at this more from a high performance point of view and structured, the 1 rep max becomes our bread and butter. And why do I say that? Because we can gauge that progression. So if you, for example, squat 100 kilograms as a 1 rep max, that's the most you can do. When we program your squats and your leg exercises from a 1 rep max of 100 kilograms, we then can limit you so that you are able to recover effectively and efficiently. So you can, for example, if you look at some of those intensities, you know then you are not, whether you can or can't, you're not squatting more than 75 kilograms, right? During that period. Because then the next time each rep is then going to be 80 to 85. So you're going to load the bar with, let's say, 85 kilos, and every single set, every single rep is going to be 85 kilos. So you're also conditioning your body to move along that. So you use the 1 rep max as a base that then you can apply to the rest of your programming. So it's merely just like a set point, right? And then of course, if your client comes to you and they're like, look, Cameron, look, I know we're meant to be reaching this and I'm meant to be doing 3 sets of 3 to 6 reps, but I really have more in the tank. Well, then we can, for example, choose, okay, cool, do we need to reapproach this? Do we need to do a new 1 rep max test to then see, okay, cool, well, you know what, you've actually progressed a hell of a lot faster, right? And your new 1 rep max is not 100 anymore. Your new 1 rep max is 120. Now we need to make those adjustments to your program to ensure that we have that continuous cycle of base, perform, etc., etc., etc.
Wow. Okay. No, you really delved into it. No, thank you so much, Cameron.
So, but all that I'm saying is that it's just to know what are we working with, because for example, it's like if you are going out, right, for a night out, and you only have 100 rand to spend, right? If you don't know that you have 100 rand to spend, how are you going to know what you're going to spend on food, what you're going to spend on something to drink, what you're going to spend on Uber or whatever? But if you know that you only have 100 rand, you can then, for example, break down how you're going to spend that 100 rand and where you want to spend it. But if you don't know how much you have, maybe you have, I don't know, 1,000 rand, or maybe you only have 50 rand. So it's almost like you're looking at what do I have to expend and what are the confinements in which I'm going to spend it to the best of my ability. Remember, this is all based on scientific literature within a certain confined space of performance and progression. What we are trying to do here is meet the maximum threshold that we can to push ourselves through that is going to allow us to recover, while meeting the minimum threshold for performance optimization, hypertrophy, strength, recovery, etc. So we want to reach the maximum threshold that we can to still be able to recover and perform effectively, whilst ensuring that we meet the minimum threshold for that recovery. Makes sense?
Yeah,
No, I might have gone
absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. And I guess also avoiding injury should be considered.
Yes, of course. So, like I said, you want to be able to push yourself to the maximum physiological threshold that you can, right? You want to be able to lift as heavy at as high intensity with as relatively higher volume or whatever the case may be as possible, physiologically possible. However, you want to still ensure while you're meeting that maximum threshold that you are still ensuring that you're able to meet the minimum threshold for recovery or digestive loading, etc., etc. So you can't burn the candle at one end and then not be able to meet the basic requirements of the other. Because what happens is then you go over the one and you're unable to bridge the gap between the two. So you're always trying to find this happy medium between the two. You don't want to do too little, so you naturally are always meeting the threshold for recovery, for performance, for all of that. You want to be able to ensure that majority of the time you are able to push yourself to get as much bang for your buck while still meeting the minimum threshold for recovery, etc. If you were to, for example, put yourself through the hurt locker of leg days, right? So much so that you're starting to communicate with your family members of time gone by, right? And you're there every day. And then all of a sudden you rock up to the gym tomorrow and you Ronnie Coleman reincarnated, right? And now all of a sudden you yeah, buddy, and all of that. Where do you think you are going to able to meet that minimum threshold for recovery? You're not. You're slowly going to reach a biochemical and metabolic capacity whereby you're going to be having more aromatic rings, you're going to have more of those biochemical compounds, which from a metabolic point of view are going to start to limit your capacity to recovery. Now, if you limit your capacity to recovery, granted, inflammation is needed for hypertrophy, etc., etc. But what also is needed for hypertrophy is muscular regeneration. So as much as you need to break down the muscle and have it regenerate to generate that element of hypertrophy and performance, right? And it's almost like again and again and again and again and again. If all you're doing is flatlining, 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 the next thing that is only going to be there if your body's not able to recover is you won't be able to perform as effectively. You are, from a neurological point of view, going to start to burn yourself out because you're going to be continuously driving that state of performance that you're not going to be able to recover effectively to train at the level that you need to. But then you're going to start running into injury issues because all of a sudden your body isn't going to be able to produce the same output that you're mentally telling yourself to produce. And that's when you're going to rack up the bar. You're going to put 4 plates on there. You know you need to get 4 reps, but you haven't recovered. You haven't rested because you're meeting the maximum threshold of performance, but you're not meeting the minimum threshold of recovery. And all of a sudden you go down, you come up, you tear a quad, you tear a hamstring, and all of a sudden now you're sulking, you're hurtful with your trainer because no, I pushed too hard, and now you're up a creek without a paddle. So it's always about with most things, how can we do the most? How can we do the least for the most output? Right? It's the same with work, right? How can we put in as little effort as possible, right, to move that needle of financial return in some cases, right? So if you could be honest with yourself, if you could arrive at work at 11 a.m. and leave at 1 p.m. and still make the same amount of money that you would working 9 to 5, you'd be stupid not to arrive at work at 11 and leave at 1. Why on God's green earth would you spend the extra hours there from 9 to 11 or from 1 until 5 if you're going to make the same amount of money? So do you see, it's all about looking at correct, it's working smart, but it's driving yourself towards that element of performance, right? Most people tend to overcomplicate the fundamentals of progression. The fundamentals of progression require hard work. They require discipline. They require all of those various different elements of performance. But what people tend to forget within all of that is time, right? Time is the mover. Time is not the quantifiable variable. Time is what moves, not quantifies. You cannot quantify how long it is going to take you because then you're going to rush. But what you can control is your energy exposure and output on a day-to-day basis. You can control the structure in which you function in. You can control the programming. You can control all of those various different elements. But the one thing you cannot control is time. You don't know how long it's going to take. We can do our best, but you don't know how long it's going to take. If you look at Ronnie Coleman, right? Probably the best bodybuilder of all time. He spent the 90s finishing outside of the first call out. He spent the whole 90s pretty much finishing, 11th, 12th, 9th, 7th, all there. And all of a sudden, bang, number 1. So do you see what I mean? That like it takes time. Not necessarily everyone is going to hit it on their first run. And maybe they will. But you know what? When you see someone hit it on their first home run, I bet you now you haven't seen all the work that they've been trying to put in their whole life. All of a sudden people see, people come out of the cracks and they think, oh my word, it's God-given talent. And granted, God-given talent, most definitely. But I'm pretty sure that they had to work on their craft for many, many years, many, many hours spent doing work without anyone noticing. So don't be so quick to always compare yourself to other people. And that's what, unfortunately, in the fitness industry, because it's very much a vain approach, because you're looking at how you look, you're looking at all these different things, it's very difficult to not have that approach of, okay, cool, why is this person started before me? They're able to squat heavier than me, etc., etc. Cool. Maybe then you do need to have a look at yourself, and you do need to think to yourself, hey, am I actually pushing as hard as I say? If my coach is telling me to do 95 of my 1 rep max, but I do 1 set of my 1 rep max and I feel like I'm going to, be sick, am I putting in all that effort? Am I tapering off? So there's all these different things. But that's why we use an element of structure so we can quantify that, so we can measure. So then we can say, hey, is this 80 to 85% of our 1 rep max? Is that actually generating the response that we wanted to generate? Are we able to recover within the structure that we have? Are we not able to recover? And it's all these different things that we slowly over time need to be able to ensure that we dotting our I's, crossing our T's to ensure that we are able to generate that response. And that's where being a coach is so important, is that you're not going to be able to get that honest response from your clients, from that 100% buy-in, if we do not show them that we are able to provide the service that they have. Because if you cannot believe in the structure and the service that you're going to provide your client, how on earth do you expect them to buy into it from your perspective? Do you know what I'm saying, guys? Like we have to be able to have that approach. Yes, Precious, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I just want to know, how do we measure intensity? Like, for instance, how do we know that we are on 80 to 85 of our 1 rep max?
You would measure your 1 rep max.
How?
Oh, you do a 1 rep max squat.
Okay.
For
I do a
example.
yeah.
So you would have a new client. So let's say you wanted to train with me and we're going to periodize you. You'd come in,
Okay.
we do an assessment session. There is a lecture on it where we do all the baseline assessments.
Okay.
And we build that up, and then I'll do various different tests, endurance tests, etc., etc. And let's say we're doing a strength test, so we'll do a 1 rep max of your squat, and let's say your 1 rep max of your squat is 100 kilograms. If your
Okay.
1 rep max squat of 100 kilogram is 100 kilograms for 1 rep, that's the most that you can do for 1 rep. Then now I know, for example, if we look at that first intensity bracket, low to moderate, you will be doing between 50 kilograms to 75 kilograms per rep for 3
Okay.
to 6 sets
Okay.
of 8 to 20 repetitions. So I could say, right, Precious, you are going to be doing 6 sets of 8 reps, for example, and you're going to be doing it at 65% of your 1 rep max, which is 65 kilograms. So you're going to use the bar and you're going to make sure that the total weight that you're lifting is 65. And every rep is going to be that weight
Okay.
for 8 reps for 6 sets.
6. Oh, okay. 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 Gotcha.
So, or we could maybe then I'm like, okay, cool, maybe I want you to train more volume. So I'm going to make you do 50 kilograms because it's between 50 and 75% for 6 sets, but at 20 reps.
Okay.
So now I'm slightly lowering the intensity to cater for slightly higher volume. But maybe I want to, as we're building into the next phase, I'm going to say, you know what, this week, let's go 75%, so 75 kilograms. We're going to do it for 3 or 4 sets at 8 reps.
Uh-huh.
So do you see how now we've lowered the volume, but increased the intensity?
Increase the intensity. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Got you. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right. Now, guys, I'm going to be right back. I just quickly need to get my charger. So, Manuel or Mela, I know we were discussing during that brief break. So if you guys just want to grab some water or something like that, you can do quickly. I'm just quickly going to get my charger so that my laptop doesn't die during this next just explanation. I'll be right back. All right. There we go. Apologies for that. Okay. Now, as you guys have probably seen in the slide, you can see how now we're building it together. So you guys remember in the first part of the lesson, we had the various different periods. So preparatory, first transition, competition, second transition, correct? Right? Now you can see that we can break that into sub-periods, right? So we can break down the preparatory into the general, the specific, and then your first transition we can see is the pre-competition, and then the competition, your main competitive, and then the second transition you have your post-competition. So you can see how we can break those sub-periods down. Everyone in agreement? You guys see that? All good? Cool?
Can I quickly ask a question?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, if you train within 80 to 95% of your 1 rep max, is that generally for you to build as much muscle as you can and for you to be as strong as you possibly can within the limit of your 1 rep range?
Theoretically, yes. Practically individual
Okay.
specific. Because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. You see, this is the problem, is that we are looking at this from a theoretical basis. Okay. Now, someone, whoever it may be, they could do 60% of their 1 rep max, but the way that they train their mind muscle connection could be of such a standard, such a level, that they can yield the same production and benefit that you would yield from 80 to 85. Now, one could argue, if they changed from 60 to 80, would they not be able to yield even more? I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But you see what I mean? How we are just merely setting up a structure here, right? There's a lot of science evidence that it shows that these are the optimized levels. If you look at the stereotypical for hypertrophy, it's anything between 70 to 90% of your 1 rep max for 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps, right? But I'm pretty sure we could all agree that for some people, depending on the muscle group or the exercise, may choose to opt for more volume, maybe not just 8 to 12, maybe 20 reps, and fluctuating maybe more around the 75% of their 1 rep max, but they just prefer more the volume association with that muscle group in terms of how they feel. So it also becomes very much of a practical component blended with the theoretical. But from a theoretical point of view, Melo, yes, 80 to 85% is probably where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck with regards to generating hypertrophy. Does that make sense? Right. Now, when we look at the different periods, let's see how the seasons fall in. So as you can see, when you are thinking of off-season, the off-season involves the general preparatory and the specific preparatory period. Pre-season involves the specific preparatory period and the pre-competitive period. Whereas in-season and main competitive are the same, and post-season and post-competitive are the same. Now, we have phases which need to fit into those seasons. So now you look at your hypertrophy or strength endurance phase, you're going to start off in the off-season. You're going to come back from your Laka holiday. You're going to start in that hypertrophy strength or endurance training. Why? Because your muscles are going to be primed for performance. Why? Because you've had that time off. right? You're going to be filled with energy, filled with glycogen, filled with all of those metabolites, which are going to be so important for generating that muscle, for generating a physiological response. Once we've generated the endurance, we're going to be able to transition into that basic strength phase. You can see how that basic strength phase is more in line with that specific preparatory. So you can see general preparatory is that hypertrophic and strength endurance. It's general. We just want you to become strong. We want you to be fit. So we're going to bring you back after a long season. We're going to make you run and we're going to make you strong. But then once you've conditioned yourself, we now want you to get really strong. Now we don't just want you to have nice biceps, nice glutes and all of that. Now what we're going to want, now we want you to get strong, functional strong, specific, right? Then we want to be able to have, from a pre-competitive point of view and in part of preseason, we want you to be able to generate that strength into power. So we don't just want you to be basically strong. We want you to be specifically strong with regards to the carryover from strength to power. We want you to be able to use all that muscular strength to generate power for a specific purpose. We want you to be able to use your strong legs to generate power to sprint. We want you to be able to use your strong arms to generate a certain power response. Then we want you to be able to peak, right? Remember with that peaking, anything from 30 to 93, we want you to peak, or 50 to 93, we want you to be able to peak. Or we want you to maintain, right? Maybe it's maintenance. Peaking would say that's more one fight. Maybe that is more like a UFC fighter. You're peaking for one event. Where maintenance would be more required, for example, for footballers or for rugby players, right? Where you need to maintain throughout an extended period of time, and maybe throughout the week, you'll go through micro phases to ensure that you can meet that threshold. Does that make sense? Right? And then you have your active rest. And now you can see, based on the phase and what you need to do, all of a sudden we need to adjust the intensity and the volume for that. So as you can see, from a hypertrophy point of view, we want low to moderate intensity, 50 to 75%. Our volume is going to be high of 3 to 6 sets of 8 to 20 repetitions. Now, if we look as we move on to basic strength, we're moving the intensity higher from that 75 to 80 to 95. We want moderate to high volume. We're changing the sets from 2 to 6, not 3 to 6. But the repetitions change, right? From 2 to 6, not 8 to 20. So we're zoning in on what we want to do. It's becoming more specific. It's not as generalized. Now we want to take that specific strength and transition it into power. So now we're looking at slightly more low to very high intensity because we want to be able to go along that intensity graph. We're then looking at an 87 to 95% of the 1 rep max. So it's still a lot of load, but we're ensuring that the intensity is there. In some cases, we'll also have 30 to 85% of the 1 rep max. So it's not always going to be high. Because it can be from low to very high. Okay? Then we're going to make sure that there's low volume of 2 to 5 sets of 2 to 5 repetitions. So depending on where we are, we can go through it. Maybe we're going to go through and we're going to build from low to high. We're going to have a set where it's 30, then it's 40, then it's 60, then it's 85, and then 85. So those are going to be the different reps, or maybe those are going to be the sets that you're going to go through. So it all depends on where you are going to be at with regards to that pre-competitive position. Then if we look at, for example, our in-season, if we're going to be peaking, of course, we have very high to very low, 50 to 93. And then we're going to work within that 1 to 3 sets, 1 to 3 repetitions of very low volume. But if we're maintaining, we don't need to necessarily fluctuate as much because we just want to make sure that we're always ready to go. We're always ready to go. So we're going to be at that moderate to high continuously with 85 to 93% of the 1 rep max, of low to moderate volume of 2 to 5 sets of 3 to 6 repetitions. So you can see we want to be more at that primed level. We want to maintain it. We want to ensure that our bodies are ready to go, primed, locked, ready to perform week in, week out. We're maintaining this level of performance where for some individuals, they just need to peak. They just need to peak for the Olympics, or they need to peak for one race or one event, right? So you can start to apply this again to people's day to day. If you have general population clients, maybe they need to peak once a year. If you're an accountant, maybe it's financial year end. So you want to spend the whole year. So when you get to that peaking point of that month or that 1 to 2 weeks where it's financial year end, they're going to be training like this for those weeks because they just want to get into the gym. They want to peak their performance. They want to get out. They want to be at their best physiological point to function as effectively as they can with what they need to do. Whereas maybe as you're training an athlete, a bodybuilder, whatever, they want to maybe maintain for a lot of the time, maintain that response. But if you're looking at a professional bodybuilder, maybe they want to peak for the Olympia, right? So they want to peak for this high performance and event where they're going to have to reach this element of performance. But if you look at the maintenance, maybe this is more for CrossFit athletes who are competing multiple weekends, or Hyrox athletes that want to maintain this level. So it's all about how or where or what you want to do and how long can you, for example, maintain for. Maybe you need to lower it from time to time. It's all about the individual response. What are they going to be able to yield? What are they going to be able to do? And what is the carryover going to be? If we cannot ensure that the carryover is of a quality that is going to meet the standards that you and your clients have set out, you're going to have to change some of these variables. You're going to have to use inclination. You're going to have to use logic to ensure that you get the biggest carryover from your client or from the team that you're working with. Because if you are continuously so focused on ensuring that you hover, here again and again and again, but the team's performance is slowly, they're not able to recover. One or two people are coming off with injuries. You may have to taper it back a little bit. But if you have done this all correctly, you have periodized correctly, you've quantified correctly, you've measured, you've done all of these things, then one would say that if all is in accordance, you've chatted with the buyers, you've chatted with the physios, you've chatted with the coaches, how do they want to play? What do we want to execute on a day-to-day basis? What do we want to execute from a match day point of view? What do we want to be able to do? Then this should be relatively straightforward. So, yeah. Everyone understand how we approach this. Everyone see how it's not just about how we're going to do legs on Monday, chest on Tuesday, back Wednesday, rest Thursday, full body Friday. There has to be a slightly more calculated approach to ensure that you're able to generate the response that you want. Because when you don't, at least then you can go back at this and you can go and look and you can say, well, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I should have done that, or this is where we could have pushed more. This is where we could have maybe taken the gas off a little bit. This is maybe where we probably should have done a little bit more focus on the strength days. Our athletes weren't strong enough, or our athletes needed more time, etc. And now you can start to look at it from an analytical point of view to ensure that the athletes that you're working with have the biggest crossover of the performance that you require. Any questions? No? All good. Okay. Is this interesting for you guys? Do you guys see how periodization has a very big place in it? But do you see how if you don't know everything that builds up to this, if you don't know your major muscle groups, if you don't know the correct exercises to train, if you don't know all of those different things, how on earth are you able to periodize correctly if you do not have the basic basis of performance? If you do not know the nutrition, if you do not know when do you, for example, load with carbs, when do you not, when do you look at more fats, when do you look at protein, what are the processes of protein, what are the not, etc., etc., etc.
Absolutely. I think thanks, Cameron. I think from my side, one of the things I've picked up is that everything is sort of interlinked.
Correct.
From the beginning of this course, everything that we've looked at and talked about and discussed and studied seem to play a complementary role one to another, and it all gears towards helping us as professionals in the field to make great success and understand what exactly we're doing, and to help a greater client base or teams, as the case may be, to actually see results, and not just giving exercises, being called coaches, but just overall understanding of what the inner mechanics, around everything else, and how it should yield a certain result eventually, and helping the clients or the teams actually to succeed and grow.
Well, definitely, definitely, Emmanuel. And I think also what Astrid has echoed you there as well, saying that explanation from someone else's point of view always helps a little bit more than the model books. Guys, you have to be able to apply the knowledge that is learned. That is what I try to explain to you guys when we are able to have these sessions, is the application of knowledge, right? Because yes, when you write the test, it's about how can you parrot learn the stuff, you write it down. If they ask you in the test, please name the different periods: preparatory, first transition, competitive, second transition. Cool, 4 marks, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, give the intensity for, the hypertrophic strength and endurance. Okay, intensity will be low to moderate, looking at 50 to 75% of the 1 rep max. Okay, cool. That's all very well. You can know the theory, and I know that you guys will know the theory because you guys work hard. But if you cannot apply the theory, if you cannot apply what you have learned, what on earth is the value of that information if you cannot apply it? Theoretically, yeah. But in theory means nothing. Because in theory, I have the knowledge to be a billionaire. In practice, I'm not. In theory, I have the physiological capability to, I don't know, play for the Springboks, right? Because we all have that physical ability. We all could possibly play for the Springboks if we wanted to. But practically, am I lining up for the Springboks today? No. Right? Now, I know those are far out comparisons, but what I'm saying is that we can know the theory, and that's great. Pride yourself on having the knowledge behind, because more often than not, that is the pitfall that people fall into. But you need to be able to apply it. But you cannot be able to apply it if you don't have the baseline of theory. Does that make sense? Like most things in life. The problem where a lot of people have is that we have the theory, we have the knowledge, and we have the potential. We just don't have the confidence to apply it. And can I tell you something? How you generate confidence? You don't generate confidence by just claiming that you know what you have, by having a lot of information. No, that's called delusion. Not confidence, delusion. Right? You generate confidence by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are able to do what you say that you can do again and again and again and again and again. That is how you generate confidence, right? How you generate confidence as a coach is you apply the knowledge that you have again and again and again. And you tweak it until you start getting results. And when you get results, you apply it and you apply it and you keep yourself available to learn. You learn, you replicate, you produce, you replicate, and you go again. But you cannot do that if you do not have the basis of information and knowledge to apply. So you cannot generate that confidence. Because if you are generating that confidence from unsubstantiated claims with lack of evidence, all that you are doing without evidence is inflating your ego. That is not confidence. That again is delusion, right? Because eventually you're going to come across a situation that confidence won't be able to bail you out. But if you have stacks of undeniable proof, undeniable evidence that you are able to do what you say that you are able to do, then boy, oh boy, do you have confidence. Because even in times of your greatest elements of doubt, even in times of your greatest times of adversity, of trials and tribulations, you'll have a stack of undeniable proof to say to yourself, to say to others, and to prove to yourself that you have what it takes. But you cannot have that if you haven't gone through the process of knowledge acquirement, practice, generate stacks of undeniable evidence that you are able to do what you are able to do. Then you generate confidence. And once you generate that confidence, ladies and gentlemen, you guys will be unstoppable. You'll be able to train whoever, whenever, however, and generate results. Now, that doesn't mean that you become ignorant. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden you become a know-it-all. You have to be willing to learn. You have to keep willing to expand on that knowledge component. But if you keep expanding your base of knowledge, if you keep expanding your approach, if you keep expanding your ability to modulate and be able to tweak and change and generate the response that you want, then you will be able to transfer and apply that knowledge in such a quantifiable form that you will be able to gauge on where you need to push, where you need to pull back, and have that carryover in performance as a coach. But if you don't generate that base, and if you don't try and fail and work on your craft and ensure that you can generate that evidence, then you're just going to be going around in circles again and again and again and again and again. If you want to reach the top, you have to be willing to go through the journey to get there. If you want to be able to reach that competition phase, we need to first go through the off season, then the preseason, then the in season. We need to make sure that we have an active rest and postseason. We need to be able to go through the periods of life, right? And we need to be able to show up on not just our good days, but our bad days. The same for our clients. We need them to show up not just on their good days, not just on arms, not just on arm day Friday, wife beater, guns, sun's out, guns out, etc. We need them to show up on the hard days, on the leg day, on the back day, right? On the days when we're doing cardio. And same with everything else at life. In order to get to Friday, you need to enjoy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So how can we enable ourselves to set up the structure so that we are as efficient on a Monday and as geared and ready to go on a Monday as we are for a Friday? If we can start to generate that, you can start to generate that in your coaching. If you can start to generate that in your approach, in your day-to-day life, your day-to-day, adventures that you go through, your carryover will begin to become exponential. Because what you'll start to notice is that what you're putting in, you'll be able to start to tick off a lot of those set points. Don't use set points as goals. Use them as points of association and quantification. The same as like with the training. And that's why training and being a trainer goes beyond just the physical, becomes very mental, because the carryover from training to life is so similar that if we are able to optimize it there, you're able to start to generate that neurological response from your clients. You'll be able to generate that carryover, and they in time will be able to become not just a better asset to themselves physically, but mentally as well. But you have to start somewhere. So in this case, you're not a psychologist, you're not a psychiatrist, whatnot, but you're able to generate the physical, And if we generate that physical, that transfers into the neurological. So when you look at this periodization point of view, when you look at tying in things from A to B to Z, right? We really need to make sure that before we start, we know the system that we are in, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. If we can at least know that, then should speed bumps come across the way, we are able to modulate this, modulate that, but you're not able to do all of that and plan effectively if you haven't generated your base of knowledge. And that's what's so cool about it, is because your base of knowledge is up to you, but it's 9 times out of 10 going to continue to evolve. And as it evolves, you yourself will be able to evolve your coaching ability, evolve your coaching approach to be able to slowly move up and generate a much better service offering. But that doesn't happen if we don't understand these nuts and bolts, if we don't understand these phases and seasons, if we don't understand all of that. So I do emphasize that you guys take a step back after today's lesson. You think about this and you think, right, there's these phases and seasons. What do I want to get out of this? What do I want to get out of that? What do my clients need? What do athletes need? Where do I want to plug and play this? And how can I generate that response so that I can replicate it to do it again? Now, when we look at the whole training, stimulus, fitness, preparedness, fatigue, very similar to the other graphs. So as you can see, fitness in purple, you can see from a training stimulus point of view, it's going to start high, you're going to fitness elevated, but the cumulative fatigue decreases. Preparedness, right? Whereas preparedness is optimized as fatigue dissipates at a faster rate than fitness. So you can see there's fatigue, and then you have fitness. So you can see how they all kind of preparedness and all of that, and you can see how these stimuluses kind of come together, right? Because over time you won't need as much fitness because your preparedness is increasing, but fatigue also decreases, etc., and it increases, and all of a sudden you're able to come to a center point where there's some form of physiological buy-in from all components. Now, here's a breakdown in summary of this, but it just doesn't have all the percentages, but it's a pretty cool one for you guys to have a look at, because here you can just see there's your annual training plan. You have a macro cycle, you break it down into your different periods. You then have your different sub periods. You can see there, and then you break it down into your different off seasons, and then you can break it down into your hypertrophy, basic strength, hypertrophy, basic strength, etc. So you can see there, then you maybe have some active rest, and you come back, you have strength and power, basic strength, strength and power, maintenance, active rest. So you can see here, you can then also look at that as different blocks. So this could be 1 month, you're just focusing on hypertrophy, then 1 month you're focusing on basic strength, then 1 month there. Then this active rest doesn't necessarily have to be too long. It could be just like a refresh week or two where you're just, having a deload or whatever the case may be. And then you come back and now you're focusing on your strength and power, your basic strength and power, and then into maintenance. So you see how we can then take this, and you can take this macro cycle and break it down further, into various different microcycles or mesocycles, and then microcycles. So do you see how it breaks down quite nicely here? All self-explanatory for you guys. It's actually quite a nice thing to look at, because then you as a coach, if you have someone who's like, okay, cool, Cameron, like Ashton, let's take you if you're working with an athlete, and they want to start training now, you can at least say, well, we have 6 months. We're going to have to fast track certain things to ensure that we can get you ready for provincials early next year, or whatever the case may be. Or we're going to take a year, and this is what we're going to do for the year. We're going to, work on this, work on that, etc., etc. So you see how there's various different approaches to the overall programming. Okay. Now, designing a one-day program, because now you need to design, correct? 3 fundamentals: warm-up, training, cool-down. If you do not put in an element of warm-up, how are you priming the muscles to exactly function effectively? If you do not organize the training effectively, how are you able to get the biggest carryover? And then if you have cool down, how are you not ensuring that the muscles are able to be in a position to recover, blood flow, etc., so that tomorrow when you come in, your warm-up can be effective, your training can be effective, and subsequently your cool down can be effective. Now, when you're warming up, dynamic, you want to move, you want to get the joints flowing, you want blood into the joints, into the muscle groups that you want to train, right? Very simple. This warm-up is not to make your client or yourself feel like you're on death row, right? This warm-up is merely for blood flow and mobility purposes, right? Do a little bit of a walk on a treadmill, 5-minute walk on the treadmill, then bang, let's go do some bands. Let's get some movement into it. Let's make sure we're dynamically warming up our muscles, dynamically warming up our knees if you're doing leg day, getting blood flow into our hips, into our knees, into our ankles, making sure that we're ready to perform. From a training point of view, we want to start with more of our compound movements, right? You want to start with compound movements, okay? And as you go further on, you want to isolate more because you want to focus more on the actual muscle group, okay? Why don't we want to do compound movements near the end? Because there's other muscle groups that will be involved. As our muscle fatigues, you don't want the other muscles to just be doing the work. So granted, when you're doing compound movements, there's more than one muscle involved. However, for example, if you look at a bench press, there are more muscles involved. There's your shoulders, there's an element of your back, etc. But if you do that first, you're putting your chest on show. It's directly a chest exercise. Yes, other muscle groups are involved. But for example, when you go towards the end, maybe you're doing more of a fly, where that is going to be specifically chest focused. So at least then you can focus solely on your chest. Whereas if you get your chest all nice and tired and fatigued from just doing flies, now all of a sudden you're going to be doing a bench press at the end. But if your chest is tired, it's going to solely be shoulders and back and arms. So do you see what I mean? How you start off with more the compound and you transition. If you look at from a cool down point of view, you want to be doing more static, making sure that the tendons that are stretched out. Do you have any niggles? Maybe your chest or your quads are a little bit tight. You just want to get some nice blood flow in there. You want to make sure that you're able to move around. Don't let things get tight. You just want to be able to ensure that you are just putting your body at the best position possible to ensure that there is that recovery process. And then you just repeat, guys. It's really, really quite self-explanatory. Any questions on that? No. Sure? Okay. Then we're going to have various guidelines for designing a program for the general population. And here we are. Right. So we want to define, understand, ensure, create, use, communicate, encourage, evaluate and gather, consider, and improve. What do I mean? We want to define. We need to define the clear objectives for your program. What is it? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to put on muscle? Are we trying to lose weight? Are we trying to become more aesthetic? Are we trying to just become brutally strong? What do we want for our program? We need to understand the diverse needs and interests of your target audience. What do they need? What do they require? Are they a mom of 2 who works 2 jobs? Right? What do they require? Are they a single parent? Are they a young gun who's just trying to look good for the beach? Like, where are they at? Are they trying to lose weight? Are they trying to put on weight? Where are they at? We need to ensure the adaptability and inclusivity in your program. Is it adaptable? If they go from one virgin to the next, are they going to be able to use the same equipment? Not all virgins have the same equipment. Are you prepared for that? Are you not? Are you able to, for example, if you've prepped with a Smith machine bench press and they go to the gym, it could be the same gym or a different gym, and all of a sudden there's no Smith machine available. Is your program adaptable for them to be able to transition that Smith machine to a barbell? Do you trust them enough? Do they know how to do a barbell? Do they know how to do a dumbbell? Are they able to transition to a dumbbell? Do they have the confidence? Do they know how to execute? So you need to make sure. Are you creating and engaging and relatable content? Is the content that you provide them relatable? Are they able to relate to it? Are they able to understand? And when I mean relatable and engaging, do they understand your diction? Do they understand your vocabulary? If you're talking about hypertrophy and they only know muscle growth, stop using the word hypertrophy. Or if you're going to use the word hypertrophy, do they know what hypertrophy means? Have you taken the time to explain to them what it means? Do they understand your cues? Do they understand what you mean by progression? So that you are all on the same page, so that you're speaking the same language. So when you say, I need you to push more here, do they know what you mean? I need you to taper off or to pull back a little bit here. Do they know what you mean? Are you providing that engaging and relatable content? Use a progressive learning approach if applicable. Again, that ties into that. Do you need to have someone, are you working with someone who's incredibly novice and you're going to have to progressively teach them over time? You can't teach them all in a day or a month, but are you able to have that progressive approach over an extended period of time? Communicate. Communicate clearly and use visual aids when necessary. When you are saying to them, no, when you're doing a lat pull down, I want you to feel this. I want you to suppress your scapula and pull in and like you're bending the bar. Do they know what that means? Do they know what that means? Do they know what a neutral grip means? Do they know what an underhand grip means? Do they know what a wide grip means? Do they know what a hook grip means? All these different things, because it's great to put in your program, oh, I want you to do a hook pull up, etc., etc. Do they know what that means? Do they know what a rest pause is? Do they know what eccentric loading is? Do they know what concentric loading is? So if you're going to use all of these things now, I want you to have a 3-second eccentric. Do they know what that means? Do they know that that means while you're lowering the weight, you count to 3? 1, 2, 3. It's not just lower, pull, lower, pull, lower, pull. Do they know what that means? Are you able to communicate effectively? Encourage interaction and collaboration amongst participants. Create environment in the physical fitness environment. Are they able to collaborate? Are you able to collaborate with other coaches? Are you guys able to, instead of both having a boot camp, are you able to combine it? Maybe you're able to have some friendly competition. My group camp against your group camp. We're going to create a little bit like a High Rocks kind of scenario, and we're going to, you know, put some prizes up for grabs. Is there going to be some friendly and some healthy competition? Regularly evaluate and gather feedback to improve your program. What are you just having a check-in? Are you just having a lacquer, you know, WhatsApp phone call, Teams meeting? All professional, but what are you trying to get out of that meeting? What are your non-negotiables? What are you getting out from a nutrition point of view, a gym point of view, a lifestyle point of view, a psychological point of view? Where are they at? How are they feeling? Do you know? Maybe they've had a bad week. Maybe they've had a bad month. Maybe they don't have the biggest buy-in from a nutrition point of view. Maybe they don't have the biggest buy-in from a training point of view. Why? What has changed? Do we need to change something? How can you help them become a better asset to themselves? What is that problem? Is it insecurity? Is it something you can solve on your own? Is it something that needs to be solved together? Have you made yourself available for them to talk to you? Have you made yourself available for them to approach you? Are you approachable? Are you not? All these little things that you need to think about. You need to consider sustainability and scalability for long-term success. Most people, I said in a TikTok yesterday, most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but underestimate what they can achieve in 5 to 10 years. Is it sustainable? See, we're so focused on the short term, not the long term. We all want to be a millionaire in a month. Quick fixes. When you're going from zero to hero. We've never invested a dime, but we want to have money flowing out of every single bank account we go. Is it sustainable? Is it scalable? Are you able to replicate that approach tenfold? What are the shortcomings? Where do you need to improve? Where do you need to improve on your knowledge base? Are you able to scale effectively? Is that something that you need to learn? Do you need to get a mentor? Do you need to maybe apply and practice? Are you able to take someone from zero to hero? Do you need a little bit of help? Do you need a little bit of confidence? Do you need a little bit of, buy-in? What is it that you need? What do you need to be sustainable? What do you need to make this a living for yourself? How are you going to do that? Are you going to make sure that you are able to yield the same success over and over again? And when you don't, how are you going to be able to adjust, correct, and go again? Okay? And then continuously improve your program based on the participant feedbacks and changing needs. So if you can do all of this, then now we can start to see, right, this is where we need to improve. This is based on what you keep saying to me, what you need to get done, how we are going to do it, when we're going to do it, what we are going to do to generate that response. And then, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be able to periodize. You'll be able to take your knowledge on anatomy and physiology. You'll be able to take your baseline testing. You'll be able to take your planes and axes. You'll be able to take your nutrition, your performance psychology, all of these different aspects. You'll be able to take them and you'll be able to construct periodization, construct your plan, and start from A to Z and have the carryover that you so desire and be able to be the best coach that you can be and have your athletes be the best athletes that they can be. Cool. And that is all, ladies and gentlemen. That is periodization 101. Questions? Any questions? You guys feel better? Not so much? How are you guys feeling? Oh, good. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah, pleasure, Cindy.
Hi, Cameron. I just want to say thank you. That was a great. Precious, it's not Cindy.
Oh, no. Cindy said that.
Do we have these every Saturday?
Depending on the calendar. No, sorry, Precious. Cindy commented at the bottom, in the chat box. No, all good. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's only a pleasure. Do you have any questions?
Do we have
Precious?
these every Saturday? Do we have these every Saturday?
No. It's based on the calendar. This is the last one for August. I think the next one is in September.
I mean, this is my first one because I just trained now, so that's why I'm asking.
No. Understood. Look, there's various different cycles. This is the last one for the June-July cycle. But then the September cycle will be, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing from my side. You said it clear enough to carry on with the course. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I just want to find out. Most likely, yeah. Actually, I will be doing the 13th of September. But guys, yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to ask, regarding you said the slides, we'll have to hear from Vincent, like when everything becomes available, or how will you think that will be conducted in terms of like us hearing back feedback from the
What
recorded
I can
sessions?
do with regards to slides, I can
Recorded sessions.
I'll send them to admin for you, and then I'll ask admin to disperse it. Okay.
Okay.
To you guys.
And okay, and the recorded sessions itself, the Teams meetings.
Hopefully this one will record nicely, and not have any bugs or anything like that. And then that should be fine for the next one. Let me just actually stop recording soon, and then yeah. But yes, Mela, I'll ensure that we don't have the same problem as last time. Don't stress.
Okay, so I'll just hear back from them then regarding the team
Yeah.
sessions, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, guys, the main thing that I want you guys to take from today is there's a lot of value in what you guys are pursuing. But if you don't see the value in it, if you don't see the long term, if you don't see the nitty-gritty, the macro cycles, the mesocycles, the microcycles, all of that, you're not going to be effectively able to understand your own service offering, and you're not going to be able to carry that across to your clients. And the one thing that you guys really need to do is believe in yourselves. Right? And I know that sounds so cliche, and I know that sounds so like, yeah, dude, whatever. My mom tells me she believes in me. My dad tells me she believes in me. My friends, my auntie, my dog, whatever. Understand that. But you genuinely have to believe in yourself. Right? I know everyone's like, yeah. But if you guys want this to work, the field is so flooded, guys. The field is so flooded with people with qualifications, without qualifications, people who are more science-based, people who are more anecdotal-based, etc. But if you want to make a mark, a lasting mark, make sure you expand on your knowledge, make sure you lay down that base, and make sure that you back yourself. Back yourself to the hills. Back yourself on your good days and back yourself on your bad days. Right? There are probably bound to be more hard days than good days, but you know what? You're going to work damn hard so that when you have those good days, you are able to ensure that you have it. Okay? You guys are doing a lot for people. You guys are helping change people's lives. But if you want it to become sustainable, leave no stone unturned and give yourselves time. Right? Give yourselves time to learn. Give yourselves time to make mistakes. Don't rush. Right? Push the things that need to be pushed. But from an overarching perspective, just take the time that it requires to generate what you need to get done. Okay? And if you guys can do that, then you can give that carryover to your clients. Then the time can be taken with your clients and allow them to be patient in the process. But if you can't be patient with the structure and whatnot that you give yourself, there's no way you're going to be able to understand the patients from them. So be sure that you are the best asset to yourself. And in being the best asset to yourself, you'll have a carryover to your clients, and being the best asset to them as a coach, and they can become the best asset to themselves. Cool.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Yeah, pleasure, Emmanuel. Melo, you have anything else to say?
Well, it's about, or not, basically just the question I thought about yesterday that I wanted to ask you. It's nothing to do with today's lesson. It's based on nutrition.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just wanted to ask, like, how does the body distinguish between, or rather yet, how does the body disperse nutrients as far as, for instance, say you're on a protein, you only eat protein for today, and how does the body now, like obviously when we speak about carbs is the main source of energy for the body, but when you specifically eat protein, how does the body uh segregate, okay, 50% of this food goes to maybe for repair, and then the other 50% is going to go to energy? Like I wanted to know, how does that the body define that sort of like disperse of nutrients like towards the allocated body parts?
Well, because your body has a biochemical reaction that it has to go through. Remember, we are looking at protein, carbs, and fats as the actual molecule. What you need to remember is, I'm pretty sure when you eat your steak, yes, that is pretty much a protein meal. But when you eat your steak, there's also elements of sugar within that. So there are elements of carbs within the steak already, right? There are elements of fat in that. So it's not just solely if you just eat chicken, all you're getting from the chicken is protein, right? You're also getting all the other different vitamins, minerals, compounds, or whatever the case may be from your diet that you get in. You then have various biochemical cascades that through digestion and absorption, the body is able to disperse those nutrients or macronutrients accordingly. Now, based on what the body has, the body will then be able to cater for where it needs it the most, which is why in some cases people forget the overarching effect of the brain. Because, for example, if you're someone who is incredibly high prone to stress, that means you're stimulating your sympathetic nervous system tenfold, which means that cortisol is up. If cortisol is up, testosterone is down. If cortisol is up, your sympathetic or your fight or flight system is up. If that is up, your body is no longer focused on taking that nutrients that you're ingesting and sending it to places for growth, muscular recovery. It doesn't care. If you're in a high state or high stress situation, your body is solely focused on using that energy that you're ingesting to be on edge. So you're just going to burn through all of that. It's going to use it as energy, right? Through various biochemical cascades, which involves a hell of a lot of biochemistry to explain and break down. But for lack of the better explanation, it's just going to use it as energy, or it's just going to store it. Whatever it can't use, it's just going to store because it's in a high stress situation. It's in fight or flight. It doesn't know when it's going to get food again. Doesn't know how it's going to respond. Now, let's say you're not a high stress individual. Let's say you at someone whose central nervous system is balanced, so to speak. Now, if it's balanced, so to speak, it's not solely based on recovery and it's not solely based on fight or flight. If you're hovering in the middle, well, then your body will be able to take that nutrients and supply it to wherever the body requires that. So that's why when you train, you're directly telling your body, listen, I'm training my legs today, right? I'm putting my legs through the ringer. This is where inflammation is occurring. This is where I want the food to go for today, etc., etc. Doesn't mean that it's going to go there, right? But you're increasing the probability that the body is going to see that there's inflammation in your quad, and your quad needs nutrients to reduce that inflammation, right? So that's where it becomes more dynamic. Look, it would be great. You get some people who, no matter how hard they train their legs, they can't get the curvature to their legs. There's also various muscular attachment, muscular association to various different training mechanisms that also plays a role. But for the most part of it, you just want to increase, for example, like with losing weight and increasing weight, you want to increase the overall net exposure of the body. So if you want to lose weight, you can't just be like, well, I want to lose weight, but I just want to lose weight in my abs. It doesn't work like that. If you picture a pool of water, if you want to decrease the amount of water, let's say water is weight, right? If you want to decrease the amount of weight of the body, if you take 1 cup of water out of the pool, does the whole volume of the pool go down or just the step of the pool? The whole pool. So that's how losing weight works. You can't spot lose weight. Anyone who says, oh, here's a great ab exercise to get chiseled abs. No, my friend. You first need to lose overall weight. Doing ab exercises will increase the muscular integrity of the abs. So it's like training any other muscle. If you train your arms and you generate the muscle growth around the arms, you will by default, when you lose weight, have bigger arms, right? Because you've trained that muscle. But
The
by doing
deficit.
biceps alone, that's not just going to make you have skinny arms. Because if, for lack or better or worse, if your body chooses to store weights on your arms, it doesn't matter how many times you train arms. Yes, in time, if you increase the muscle to fat ratio on your arms, then yes, your biceps could look slightly leaner because there's increased muscle mass, etc. But by no means by just training arms are you going to make your arms leaner, if that makes sense. So it's that overall approach. So you first got to do the overall and like the broad strokes, and then you start reaching the finer strokes. And when you get to the finer strokes, that's when, for example, you can do that. So from a protein point of view and a carb and a fat, you want to make sure that you're meeting that minimum threshold, right? You want to make sure that you're meeting that 2 grams per kilogram every day to put your body in the best components so that when you do train legs, when you do train back, when you do train chest, when you do train all of that, that you're provided the body with the adequate amino acids to regenerate muscle in those targeted areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you did. I think you actually also expanded more on certain questions that one sometimes might have as regards to
Yeah.
when it comes to like sport, sports, to decrease a
Weight loss.
specific
Yeah.
weight loss in a specific
Yeah.
area.
But it's
So
the
yeah,
same
no,
with
that's
nutrition.
understood.
It's the same with nutrition. How do you get 50% going here, 50% going there if your expenditures like that? Look, each individual is going to be different, but it's those probability of odds. If you make sure that you're getting 2 grams per kilogram of protein per day, if you make sure that you're getting X amount of fats in per day, if you're getting X amount of carbs in per day, then by probability point of view, you're putting yourself in the most hypertrophic state to generate muscle. The same way as losing weight, if you are putting yourself in the greatest chance for a calorie deficit, so you're reducing food intake, you're increasing energy expenditure, by the laws of probability, you're putting yourself at the biggest rate of probability to lose weight and to be thermodynamically efficient, to be in a surplus of energy. Does that make sense? So you're burning more than what you're consuming. Whereas if you
Yes,
want to put on weight, then you increase that probability. So
so
it
it
is an
does.
exact science, but it's not an exact science of, well, if I eat this amount of protein, I know exactly that 50% is going to go there and 50% is going to go there. It doesn't exactly work like that because each individual's biochemical cascade of breaking down nutrients is going to be completely different. How I absorb chicken compared to how you absorb and digest chicken is going to be very different. We may have similar responses, but it is not intrinsically going to be directly the same. There's a hell of a lot of genetics that play a role in that. There's a hell of a lot of just physiological and biochemical roles that play that. And that's the same when it comes to proteins. People will buy protein because it says, no, you get 25 grams per scoop. But how much of those 25 grams are you absorbing? I may
Very
absorb from
limited.
a bioavailability point of view, I may, of that, let's say only 12 grams of that is bioavailable. So only 12 grams of that you're actually absorbing. But I may absorb of that protein, for lack of a better example, I may absorb 10. You, Melo, may absorb 12. Astrid may absorb 6. Precious may absorb 4. There's no guarantee to how each individual is going to have it. That's why when you do it, you put things in place so you increase your odds of probability of being able to generate that response. What we do know without a shadow of a doubt is that we do require amino acids as the building blocks for muscle. So therefore, by eating a more protein dense diet, you're increasing your body's capacity of amino acids. But make no mistake, your body can also only absorb so much at a given point. So that's where time comes in. You need to expose yourself for longer periods of time. You need to expose your gut, etc., etc. So do you know what I mean? It's very much an ebbs and flows kind of thing. But if you can increase your probability of having that storage, then by by all sense and purposes, you'll be at a better point to generate that desired response.
Okay. Okay. Just a quick question, just a small one.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, in order for you to like get the best of, for instance, the nutritional value within a specific food group, I wanted to ask what would be like a quick method or ways that you would ensure that you remain within a specified maintenance level that you would target, or in a surplus level, without like with knowing that there's the factors of genetics involved, that you might get, minimal nutritional value out of a specific food type.
Okay, give me an example.
Say, you eat eggs, the way
Yeah.
how can I say, the gram of the nutritional value, as far as it's like the example you made the last time when you spoke about the eggs, as far as we spoke about eggs
Bioavailability.
in meat. Yes, the
Yes. Okay.
bioavailability.
Okay.
Yes, as
So
far
what are
as
you asking?
to ensure that you get the absolute calorie, that, for instance, if you want to be in maintenance, that you ensure
Yeah.
that you get the specific, how can I say, the calories, for lack of a bit, I think, yeah,
That you
calories.
require
Yeah.
to be in maintenance.
Yes.
Well, you
Yes.
first need to calculate your energy exposure. So you look at things like BMR, total daily energy expenditure, thermic effect of food, etc. So you'd need to
Physical
look at
activity.
that first, right? So how much are you burning per day by just the actual functioning, right? So you need to look at your metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, total daily non-energy expenditure. So you look at your NEAT, look at all of those different things, and then once you see then you can see how much you need to eat. If for lack of a better scenario, take what you eat on a daily basis, right? For what you are at, see what the caloric quantity of that would be. So let's say it's 2,500 calories. Then that you could take, quote unquote, not as your official, but that's your maintenance, right? Excuse me. So do that for a week and see if your weight stays the same. But during that week, do everything the same. If you gym 3 times a week, gym 3 times a week. Don't now gym 4 times a week. Just keep it completely identical as to what you've been doing. If your weight stays the same, then you've most likely met your maintenance, right? There are various calculators that you can use on Google and that, where you type certain things in, you type your age, your weight, your height, etc. Your work capacity, is it more sedentary, is it more active, etc. How many times a week do you train? And it gives you a really good pretty much ballpark for where your maintenance is. But if you're not going to use that, I mean, you can use that and then also test during the week. Then let's say you have a week where your weight doesn't fluctuate. Maybe it fluctuates 1 or 2 kilograms here or there, or a couple of 100 grams. That's pretty much your maintenance. Then if you want to decrease weight, you take that 2.5 and let's say you subtract 500 calories. So then you create a meal plan that caters for 2,000 calories. You take that 2,000 calories, you then you divide that into your different meals based on your protein requirements, and then you go to carbs, and then lastly fats, and then you're able to adhere to that, and then you make sure that you have a training program that you want to buy into. Maybe you want to stick to 3 times a week. Maybe you want to move up to 4 if you want to lose weight, so you're burning more energy over the course of the week. But if you want to put on weight, then of course, then you take the 2,500, you'd add 500 calories plus minus, and you create a meal plan with 3,000 calories. And then by default, in the laws of thermodynamics, you would put on weight because you're consuming more energy than you're burning. Whereas if you drop it to 2,000 from 2,500, you will there by default be in a deficit. Therefore, you'll be burning more than you're consuming. So then you thus lose weight. Do you see how you can look at it like that? So then you can start to then look at that as your maintenance, and then you can look at your maintenance, and then you start off with protein. So you weigh, for example, 80 kilograms. You take 80 kilograms. You need 2 grams of protein per per kilogram of body weight. So you weigh 80, you times that by 2, you get 160. So you take that 160, you need 160 grams of protein. You times that by 4, which is 320, which is 640. So there you already know that 640 calories of that 2,000 that you are going to be having is already attributed to protein. That therefore means you have a remaining 1,360 calories that you can attribute to carbs and fats and micronutrients.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope this portion is also included in the recorded. You recorded this part as well.
I haven't stopped recording. Don't stress. I haven't stopped recording.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, and that's how you can break it down. So that's what you need to be able to see, and you need to be able to look at. And then from there, then you can start to go into what sources are you going to use to generate those 160 grams of protein. What are you going to do then? So then bear in mind, if you choose chicken breast, chicken breast, if you type it into MyFitnessPal, it's also going to have everything else. Only a pleasure, Astrid. Only a pleasure. We'll be wrapping up shortly, but have a great weekend. You take that chicken breast. That chicken breast is going to have various different other approaches. It's going to have various different, energy components. It may have an element of carbs, an element of fat, so overall, when you add it all together, if you use like MyFitnessPal or whatnot, you'll see that all of it starts to add up. So it's not like solely you're only looking at protein for you're only looking at the protein of the chicken breast, because the chicken breast can also provide other stuff. So you don't want to not look at the fat components of the chicken breast or the carbohydrate of the chicken breast, because if you don't look at that and then you're adding in other stuff solely for their fat component or their carbohydrate components, then you'll end up with skewed results with your net total. Then your net total won't be 2,000 calories. It may actually be 2,300 calories. But because you haven't accounted for those others, now all of a sudden you're at the end of the week, you're trying to be in a calorie deficit. Now you're getting cutful with yourself because you haven't lost the weight that you wanted to lose. Meanwhile, you're actually only in a 200 calorie deficit, not a 500 calorie deficit, because you haven't accounted for the additional carbohydrates and fats that the components that you've added to your meal plan intrinsically have. So that is why cookie cutter plans majority of the time don't always work, because the way people absorb protein, the different protein sources, the different food groups, etc., the requirements, maybe my base is 2,600, yours is 2,500. But now a coach is giving us both the same plan, which maybe then I'm losing more weight or you losing more weight than me. Because if they planned it on me, it's going to be 2,100. Therefore, I'll lose more weight than you because you're actually only 400 calories in a deficit. Does that make sense? Well, I'm in my specific 500. You see how it, chops and changes.
Fine margins.
So, yeah, fine margins, but it's overall, it's a lot more simple than it is. It just sounds complicated, but when you start to do it, when you program meal plans, when you start to do that, when you program training programs, you'll start to generate that confidence. You'll start to trust your intellect. You'll start to trust your knowledge. But when you start, yes, it will be quite tedious. It will be quite time extensive. It will be quite time consuming, etc. But if you do it properly from the beginning, you learn the tricks of the trade, so to speak. You learn, okay, you'll eventually get to a point where you know that 20 grams of chicken yield X amount of protein or X amounts of calories, etc., etc., etc. And you'll start to be able to almost construct a meal plan in your head without needing to confirm it with MyFitnessPal or various different caloric calculators that are across the internet. But like I said, with everything, you need to start with a base. You need to build your base. So build your knowledge, practice, make sure you become confident. And then from there, then you just continue expanding your knowledge. Cool beans.
Thank you, Cameron.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop the recording there. You no longer have to stay. It's 8:30 now. thank you so much for joining. And yeah, looking forward to the next one, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend all.
No worries. You too. Only a pleasure. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Charlize. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Mello. Hope you guys have a great weekend. And yeah, see you guys in the next one.
See you in the next one, Cameron. Bye.
Thanks, Mello. Cheers.
Thanks.